gentlemen. I'm back, bitches. And the way that we record, it feels like I've been gone for a hell of a lot longer than a week. I'm also sick, which I think makes my voice gravelly and sexy, so I actually like the way I sound in the microphone right now.
I was gonna say it's a nice huskiness to it.
It's like the episode of Family Guy where Lois keeps having sex with Peter while he's sick because his voice is so like gravelly, and then he tries to get himself sick, and the way he does it is by becoming a woman at work that can't get sick right now, and that's how he gets sick. That's what I'm like right now.
It sounds like if we had to record the show on Friday or Saturday, you would probably sound like Harvey Fierstein. David, why did I just send my mother to Atlanta? Like that's what I would expect you to sound.
Well, right now I think I sound nice and sexy and delicious. Anyway, welcome to the show, 81st episode of Blueshirt's Bandwidth. I'm your host, Joe Fortunato, joined as always by my co-host, Eric Cohn. Eric and I have decided, Eric decided that he doesn't like us talking back and forth with each other in the beginning of like, how are you? So we're going to start moving forward with like, ways to stretch our legs a little bit in the beginning. We're doing this off the cuff. So I've decided, Eric, I have a trivia question for you. What is the animal responsible for the most deaths every year of humans?
Isn't it the hippopotamus?
It is the hippopotamus. I'm surprised. So I just got off a Disney cruise, which you should all do if you have children. Do a Disney cruise. Also, my wife is a travel agent, so if you need the help, by all means, this is a selfless plug. Reach out to me. I'll set you up with her. You don't pay a dime. It's amazing.
Phrasing.
Anyway, we did a couple of...
I just want to clarify that Joe has offered to set anybody in this audience up with his wife. That is exactly the words that he spoke.
If you could get her, take her, by all means. Yeah, whatever. So we did a couple of days at the park, and we go to Animal Kingdom. The kids aren't huge Animal Kingdom fans, but they love the safari. There's like a safari that you can do. Hippos are scary shit, man. It is not a game. They're big. One of them was running. It was fast. They're very cute. Like their mouths are enormous, but it could kill you in a second. And I feel like I vaguely remember a story of like a guy saving a hippo, like a drowning baby hippo, and they became friends. And then I think years later he went back and the hippo fucking dragged him to the lake and killed him. So, but they're very cute. So I don't know. That's my starter for this week. That's what it is. And you got it right. So you won.
I don't think you can domesticate a hippo, as that guy apparently thought that he might do, or they will form some kind of bond to the human like dogs. I mean, this is one of the reasons that dogs are awesome, right? Is because dogs evolved to want to be with us in a way that every other animal that we have ever kept as pets, we have domesticated and made able to be kept by us as pets. So that's one of the reasons that dogs are absolutely awesome. But no, my wife actually used to work for a relief nonprofit organization and went to Africa and came back with one of that is one of the key pieces of information. I don't think, however, the animal that gets the most love disproportionate to its deadliness is the bear. People love bears. We have cartoon bears all the time. People think bears are adorable, all different forms of them. Bears would eat your face.
Yes,
they
don't
want to eat your face.
Especially polar bears. Polar bear will fuck you up, like for real. So there you go. Worry about that. Anyway, welcome to the show. Thank you all for being here. 81st episode. Eric, I actually think I know this. At least I know of two players who have worn the number 81.
There are only two.
Okay, I'm going to go with the lesser-known guy first, because when the Rangers traded for him, I actually thought he was going to be something, and that would be Enver Leeson.
Enver Leeson, 2010, correct?
And then the man with the greatest shootout move ever, Marcel Hossa.
Marcel Hossa, yes.
No, Marcel Hossa, right, not
Marcel,
Marian
yes.
Hossa,
We had the wrong Hossa.
Yes, we had the wrong Hossa. But he had that sick shootout move. That was amazing. So
the Raiders had two guys, well, I guess Zuccarello too, who were like the sick shootout specialists. So it was Marcel Hossa, Zuccarello, and Wojtek Wolski.
Forgot about Wolski. That's right. He was only a Ranger for like a year, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
A year or two, something like that. Yeah, it was not long. And again, a guy who's utility was kind of confined. I mean, that really is an interesting thing to think about, that there is a brand of player who probably, would have otherwise only been in the American Hockey League and probably never spent any time in the NHL. But once the rules were changed to include the shootout, had more of an NHL career because of how good they were in the shootout.
It's actually, yeah. And if you think about it, like that, it's funny because there have been instances where like there's a very real memory, right, of like, what was it, Ole Jokinen missing the shootout shot when Marian Gaborik was just sitting there and the Rangers missed the playoffs because they lose to the Philadelphia Flyers, if I'm not mistaken. I think that was my senior year of college. Like, I have vivid memories of the shootout being a disastrous thing for the New York Rangers, but I do remember Zuccarello just being automatic. I think he's one of the better shootout performers, or at least was, in the NHL. I'm going to get Charlied on that, I'm sure. But Marcel Hossa, I remember just being like an automatic. It was like that forehand, backhand, just top shelf roof situation. So that was always good. Anyway, good to think about. Good to remember some guys. This is Blueshirt's Bandwidth. I said that before. BlueshirtBanter.com, $85 a year gets you all your ad-free access to the New York Rangers. Please subscribe. $40 a year gets you access to our Discord, gets you access to the question thread, which Eric puts up every single week. We ask those questions throughout the show. We sprinkle it in like a chef would. YouTube.com/BlueShirtBanter, Facebook.com/BlueShirtBanter, BlueShirtBanter.com/BlueShirtBanter will also bring you to Blue Shirt Banter. If you could, leave 5 stars wherever you listen to us. Leave a nice comment. The comments that are about how much you love me and how much you hate Eric are particularly pleasurable for me, so just keep that up. And I think that covers most of the housekeeping, Eric. You can probably drag Charlie's bum ass into the show.
So you clearly did not listen to last week's episode.
No, I cannot stress how out of touch I've been. The really good thing about a cruise is you have really no connection when you're out on the water to anything. So I was getting, like, when we dock somewhere, I would check my work email, see what was going on there. That was it. And then, I've been sick and just trying to get back into the swing of things. So I'm assuming I was relentlessly attacked on that episode.
Well, you're going to know why I knew you didn't listen to the episode within the first 2 items of the Ombudsman Report here. So we will get to it with the Podcast Ombudsman Report for Blue Shirt Bandwidth, episode 80, where, of course, each week Charlie Vidal will listen to the episode of the podcast and correct the record on anything that Joe and I, or in this case, Chip, gets wrong.
Oh, I'm so ready for what's about to happen. I could feel it in my bones.
Starting with not Joe Fortunato. Eric called himself Joe's, quote, much better looking and clearly more intelligent co-host. Eric is not better looking than Joe. I will note...
Oh my God, Charlie, wow.
I will note that he made no comment on the fact that I said I was more intelligent than you. So we're just going to assume that was correct because obviously. S in Blue Shirt Bandwidth. There is one S in Blue Shirt Bandwidth. The word shirt begins with an S. There is not a second S to make Blue Shirt plural. Do you know what I'm talking about, Joe?
No.
Every week you introduce this show as Blue Shirt's Bandwidth, which is not the name of the program.
Do I introduce it as Blue Shirt's Bandwidth?
Yes, we've been doing it for 80 episodes, and I have let it go for 80 episodes, and I brought it up with Chip last week because it amuses me every time, as most of your mispronunciations or malapropisms do. But yes, there is no possessive S in the name of this podcast. It is Blue Shirt Bandwidth.
I actually, that's a huge pet peeve of mine too. So for me to be in violation of that is actually quite alarming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, now you know.
Fair.
Now you know. I'm going to give you a crisis of confidence every time you start introing the show now.
That's fine.
It's going to be fun. I'm going to enjoy it.
Blue Shirt Bandwidth.
Episode 80. During the discussion on who this episode should be named for, Hugo Olash's brief stint with the Rangers was mentioned. Olash was called up to the Rangers on February 5th, immediately following the Rangers' 2-0 loss to the Carolina Hurricanes that kicked off the Olympic break. This was because the Rangers were required to have 2 healthy, not on injured reserve goaltenders on their NHL roster throughout the break. Igor Shesterkin had been placed on injured reserve on January 6th, and did not return until the first game following the Olympics. Jonathan Quick was healthy, and the Rangers opted to send Spencer Martin down to Hartford so that he would get playing time during the Olympic break. Olash was the third option for Bloomington in the ECHL, playing in 18 games behind Dryden McKay and Callum Tung. He was the Rangers' 7th-round pick in 2020 and has played one game for Hartford since being signed out of Merrimack College in 2024. JT Miller. Eric argued that JT Miller was better the second half of the season. Looking at his top-line production, this can appear to be the case. Before the Olympic break, Miller had 36 points in 48 games, good for 0.75 points per game. Following the break, Miller had 17 points in 20 games, which is 0.85 points per game. Charlie decided to check under the hood and look at the advanced metrics. Below is Miller's total expected goals for. 0.0 is league average for each month of the season. Just to summarize briefly, October, 2.7 net XGF, and in December, just a little above 1. Every other month of the year, his net XGF was negative, including being negative 4.5 in November and negative 3.9 in January. So as you can see, Miller's best month was October, and his only average months were October and December, above average months. Miller only played 68 games, and his second 34 games played were significantly worse than his first 34. Of course, the irony there being, and it's quite actually stark with the chart Charlie has here. The first half, 34 games, negative 0.9 net XGF, and the second half, 34 games, negative 8.05 net XGF. So the irony here, of course, this is one of the things that, while I think we appreciate advanced metrics and do think that they tell us some interesting things, you do have these seeming contradictions, right? Where Miller's counting stats were much, much better in the second half of the season. And the advanced metrics are telling us that his play was actually a lot worse in the second half of the season. He played much better earlier in the year, despite the fact that the Rangers couldn't score, and he was seemingly snake bitten. So I think that's all worth considering. I think it is hilarious that I was trying, after all that I have said on this podcast, to say something nice about JT Miller. And here comes Charlie to tell me that actually it's not quite as good as I thought it was. And
is Miller on our schedule, or should I interlude here?
I'll just say that concludes the Podcast Ombudsman Report for episode 80, and I will let you tee off on Miller or anything else wherever you want to take it.
Well, I need to make a comment on Quick, but since we were just talking about Miller, let me just make the comment on Miller. Again, forgive me, my timing on this is off. When you and Chip did the show, you covered Breakup Day, correct? So Breakup Day was covered?
Breakup Day did not happen.
Oh, it was not?
Day was
okay,
on
so
Friday, so we have not covered any Breakup Day stuff
all right,
yet.
Then
so
let me talk about Quick
for this.
Let me talk about Quick first, and then we'll get to Breakup Day. I know this happened while I was out. I would just like to say that I think Quick's time in New York should really be remembered quite fondly. It's a real shame that he did not win, and the Rangers did not win the Stanley Cup in 23 for obvious reasons. But I think the idea of Jonathan Quick coming into New York and being just this like really adult voice in the room, and the leadership that he showed that year that was referenced by a bunch of players who were, responsible for really just kind of dragging the Rangers through the playoffs. I think Quick was, as much as you can represent the brand, he represented the brand. And I was never on the anti-Quick train for whatever reason. I do not blame him for 2014. There's other people that I blame, like the officials and Dustin Brown.
Dwight
so
King.
I never had that like hatred of him in the first place, but I'm really glad he was a Ranger. I'm glad he got the opportunity to end his career with his childhood team. I think the Rangers are going to severely miss him next year. Not necessarily his play on the ice, but his voice in the room and his leadership, which I got to be honest with you, not something you can say about many backup goaltenders. Like that means something to me. And I also think that in a really weird way, him sticking it out the past 2 years through all this bullshit, I think he was going to retire this year regardless. I think he just thought it was time. I definitely get the sense that, he also realizes he's not leaving the Rangers in the lurch. Garand obviously did some really good things and I think impressed the right people. And either way, thank you, Jonathan Quick. You were a great Ranger. I very much so appreciated your time here, and you deserve your flowers for sure. So that's all. That's all I wanted to say there. Anyway, let's roll over to breakup day. And I'm going to start with Miller because this was the comment that I was going to make while we were talking about this. I was pretty much fine with everything that happened. But the piece that I got my hair up a little bit on was the JT Miller sometimes I put too much pressure on myself comments, especially in the beginning of the year when the team wasn't doing that well. Because the one thing that I really have a complaint about JT Miller for was the effort and the way that he handled himself pre-Olympics. I also think the angriest outcome was what happened, which was not him playing, not him going out after the Olympics was over, but actually playing better once the Olympics was over. Okay, you got the job done. And I know he spoke about this too, where the only concern is the Rangers and that's moving forward. Look, I think there are fair questions about whether or not he should have been the captain from the jump. I think we're seeing that. I've certainly been a JT Miller defender in a lot of respects that he was hurt, and I think he's going to be better next year, and he's avoided some of my ire. But the looking back in the rears, sometimes I put too much pressure on myself. Then you should have tried harder on the that's the thing I have no patience for. The effort is the thing you can control. This is what I was saying all of last year. The puck may not go in the back of the net. You may not win hockey games. You may have some, poor bounces, whatever it may be. The try hard you have in your control. And I think if we saw the JT Miller this year at the end of the year, who was actually skating and getting into fights and, whatever. I mean, we just went through our Blueshirt banter grades, which I'm not going to spoil for you guys. I'll tell you that if I had to rank players from top to bottom, I think Sam Carrick might be my number one rated player for the Rangers. Literally, him and Gavrikov. Just from what I was expecting going into what I got, Sam Carrick was the version of JT Miller that the Rangers promised us and that we didn't get. Now, do I think Miller will be better next year? Yes. Do I think Miller's a very important part of the Rangers' soft collusion to try to get some of these USA guys over? Absolutely. I get it. But I got my hair up a little bit at this, I guess I put too much pressure on myself. So where was the exit valve on that? Because I didn't see it trying harder on the ice. So what, you know what I mean?
There was a incident in some game, and I'm trying to remember what the game was. I know I wrote the game notes for it because I teed off on Miller in it, but there was an incident where he had a player with the puck coming up along the near side boards in the Rangers zone. The puck got away. It ended up in the back of the net, and you see him just do the Ovechkin controller disconnected thing where he just glides towards where the play was headed. And somebody, I think, had pointed out, too, that this was the end of a longer shift for him and all of that. And look, I get that. It would have been a lot better if it was the end of a shift and he exerted all that was remaining in the tank to try and fail to make a difference in that play and the puck still ended up in the back of the net than seeing just him coast towards the play, the puck go in, and him kind of drop his head and sulk about it. It was too much of that stuff throughout the year. And so I agree with you entirely that fine, that quote.
Can I also add a moment if we're talking about this? So right before the Olympics, when the Rangers were playing the Bruins, and I think I wrote the notes for this story and I wrote about it, and I think I mentioned this on the podcast. There was a play where I believe Perreault got smoked on the side of the net. Mm-hmm. Not dirty after the whistle, but after the whistle. And Miller grabbed the Bruin and this is the moment to fight, right? Like if you're going to be this rough, tough junkyard dog team with this level of like bullshit,
Drag him into
no
the fight.
BS, whatever, drag him into the fight. Miller like literally held him there and just waited for the official to come, like break them up so that he wouldn't have to do anything. And it was like, God, like, and I think I remember saying at the time, I get it. You don't want to get further injured before the Olympics, but like, Jesus Christ, that's a tough look for me to see. And like that level of, I think one of the things I've done that you haven't, and the more I think about this, the more I think you're probably correct. I'm sort of removing the C from Miller in my assessment of him, in that like he needs to be a leader by example. I think he did a relatively good job this year with the media, even though at the end it got a little wonky. I do like him taking responsibility for, his actions to an extent that Breakup Day, fine. I think the guy who really took the biggest step forward in that regard was Mika Zibanejad, who, can we just say that, like, for me to not immediately be filled with rage and ire at him saying that he wants to stay in New York, the 180 turnaround that he's done for
Really
me
incredible.
from last year to this year is truly like, especially when everyone was rooting against him. And I think he even says like, maybe I proved to some people that, I belong here. And it's like, yeah, dude, you have. Like, look, you're never going to be fully forgiven. Like, it's always going to be a mark on your resume, always, for what happened in 23, 24 or 24, 25, whatever it was. But, we're cool now. You're more than welcome back. Like, it's going to be fine. And he's still got it. He's still put up respectable numbers this year on a not that respectable team. But if Miller is going to remain the captain of this team, which of course he's going to be, there's no reason for him not to be. I really need to see a much different JT Miller next year. And it's got to start at on the ice. It just has to start with the effort and the give a shit and like put your money where your mouth is. You were a little tweaked, you were a little dinged up, whatever. Figure it the fuck out this summer and come back like an animal, because all that, Mika Zibanejad ire that is now sort of dissipated has to go somewhere. It's the rule of the Rangers. Like, you gotta, and for me, it's going right into Miller if shit is not straightened out next year.
Yeah, I think that quote of, I put a lot of weight on my shoulders, and I think in moments it might have been a little too taxing for me, kind of comes across as that, job interview question of like, what's your greatest weakness? And it's just, I just care too much and I try too hard.
That is my answer, by the way, to that question.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. It was just, there were a lot of bad looks from Miller throughout the year, and that you're right that it was mostly in the realm of things that are within his control of how much effort he is exerting on the ice. Or as we talked about all throughout the season, if he really is that hurt, then go on IR and get better, right? Like, just the one of the things that really drove me nuts was the him pushing to be on the opening night lineup. So fucking what? Right? I get it. Like, you're just been named captain. You want to be out there and opening night. Like, you'll get introduced. You'll get introduced standing in a suit on the bench. But if you really were not in game condition, you shouldn't be playing in the game. And he clearly played too long at the beginning of the season, even though he was, again, by Charlie's advanced metrics that he recapped there, played better at the beginning of the season than he did at the end of the season. Some of these things are admittedly contradictory, but it was the effort stuff that was really infuriating for me. And I got exasperated by the end of the year with his handling of the media. I agree with you. I think he did a pretty good job of it at the beginning of the year. I don't know that he handled it particularly well when things finally hit rock bottom and towards the end of the year. But, this is one of those things, right, where what you said about Mika Zibanejad, I think, is true. Maybe the better way to put it is, I think Mika Zibanejad can be forgiven, but the whole thing will not be forgotten. I am going to remember what happened to the 2024-25 New York Rangers and who were the culprits of that for a very long time. But I can see a path to forgiving Mika Zibanejad for all of that stuff. I'm just not going to forget about it. I can see a path as well to forgiving JT Miller for this season, although I won't forget about it. But it really does necessitate that he is much better next year than he was this year. And the thing that has been terrifying me for the last couple of months is maybe he wasn't that hurt. You look at the performance that he had in the Olympics and you look at the fact that he really didn't spend a lot of time on IR. I don't know, man. I would just be, to your point, a lot easier to stomach if there weren't so many clips of him expressing terrible body language when things weren't going well. I just keep coming back to that. I remember this time who said it, that tweet from Jeff Follett, who said that, he is an amplifier on a good team and he is an anvil tied around you on a bad team. And the biggest concern that I think Ranger fans should have is how long this team might continue to not be very good. And that is the JT Miller that we are going to get, as the anvil JT Miller. I hope things are different next year. I just have more skepticism about that than I did 4 months ago or so.
Well, and it's the age piece too, like we were talking about with Mika Zibanejad, and that we're ultimately talking about with Vince Trocheck, where it's like where there is a line somewhere where the cliff is, and you don't necessarily know where it's going to be. But when a guy goes over it, sometimes they just go over it. And the real fear here now, Miller's contract is different than Zibanejad's. Miller does not have a full no movement clause through the length of his contract.
Yeah, after next year, it becomes a 15. I think it's
correct,
a 15
limited no
clause.
Trade. Now, you would need somebody to actually want to trade for him, so there's that. But with a rising cap, and if a team thinks that they're close, and they're looking for that edge, like you said, because Miller is truly, it's a great comment. He's a great amplifier on a good.
Yeah. And if they accept that Villette theory that, if you put him in a better environment, then you're going to get a better version of him, right? Like he is not the floor raising kind. Like we talked about this earlier in the year. You need guys who are floor raisers. And I think JT Miller just responds too much to the circumstances that are in front of him that aren't floor raising the way that I think you would want him to be. But if you had a good team and you had the opportunity to require him in the same kind of way that, you even saw Elliot Friedman talking about this, that there is inevitably going to be some team that is going to lose in the first round of the NHL playoffs and are going to say, we really could use a guy like Vincent Trocheck. And, in the future, when it's down to a 15-team limited no trade clause for Miller, there's probably also going to be a team that is going to say the same thing about a guy like JT Miller. So there's an ability to get out of it. It is not as locked in as you said about Mika Zibanejad, but I'm really, really nervous about Miller for next year because I feel that he's hurt and we have reason to believe that he will be better next year when he is fully healthy. The level of confidence in that for me just declined throughout the season.
Remind me, your Elliot Friedman thing. I have a question for you about that with the playoff piece, but there's the bigger concern I have, because listen, Miller was hurt to start the year for sure.
Absolutely. Agreed.
He definitely got hurt throughout the year. He was banged up. I think if the Olympics doesn't happen, he's on the IR at some point, probably in November, I would say, if he even comes back the way that he did. I truly think him forcing himself back into the lineup was an Olympic thing more than anything else. But
I got my problems with that too.
You're absolutely right to be skeptical about this. And, he is like we are in with Chris Drury, where it's like he has to prove us right rather than be proven wrong. JT Miller has to prove me right than, me be proven wrong here, that I think he could be better next year. So another thing to come out of breakup day, this is on the good side of the list. Certainly seems like things have thawed out a little bit with Adam Fox. I think the way he even spoke about like the comments that he made was more, it sounded past tense, where it was like, I was never worried about the guys in the room or something. It was just, I was worried about the direction. It seems like those fears have been somewhat calmed a little bit, I would say. Probably really good news for the Rangers, because if you're actually, and look, we're gonna talk about Drury probably pretty extensively. if we're truly of the mind that this is a retool and not a rebuild, which you and I are not, the only way that that's possible is if Adam Fox sticks around. Although I will say, I tweeted something out about the Quinn Hughes play,
Yeah, I
and
saw that.
I did it. It's funny. I did it completely tongue in cheek, knowing it would piss off Rangers fans. Like it's one of the few times that I'm like, and I got like flies or moths to the flame, Eric. Fox isn't that good of a skater. He would have been at the blue. Like the amount of you fucking peasants who go out of your way to talk shit and actively hate the best defenseman the Rangers have had since Brian Leach. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. You guys don't deserve nice things.
Yeah. I thought Fox's comments were pretty encouraging, and you are correct that if we are talking about a retool and not a rebuild, then yeah, you want Adam Fox to be sticking around. You don't want him to be demanding a trade. And we'll get to this as well, that just because what the plan and the strategy is not public information doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, doesn't mean that it hasn't been shared or isn't being shared with key stakeholders. So I took all the Adam Fox stuff to generally be a positive. Yes.
And like much needed good news, honestly, because if JT Miller is going to go out of his way to try to bring some of these boys over, I don't know who you're encouraging if you lose Adam Fox to make their way to the New York Rangers, because there's really not much here as it goes. Any other standouts for you from Breakup Day? This was not. I think I was much more interested in last year's Breakup Day just because of how raw it was, and we didn't know if we were going to have a coach. Well, we assumed we were going to have a coaching change, and just seeing how everybody was going to react to it. This, I like. This was very meh for me. No, even the Miller thing pissed me off, but it was like if we weren't doing a podcast, I wouldn't talk to somebody about it. You know what I mean?
Totally.
The big thing is the Adam Fox like positive movement and the arrow pointing in the right direction. Outside of that, I don't think Johnny Brodzinski talking about how he's not sure if he's going to leave it to his agent. Go get the bag, dude. Like you don't have many opportunities at this. By all means, I'd love to keep you, but we've had lots of conversations about the fact the Rangers are keeping too many depth guys around. Like go forth, young Padawan, and make your money. Nothing was interesting to me, particularly.
The only other thing that really caught my attention, and it was not for a like big picture trajectory of the Rangers kind of reason, was just Vincent Trocheck's story about what happened to him at the beginning of the season, where he had some kind of virus or bacteria that created the fluid in his lungs.
Went to the hospital,
yeah. So like he got, he was already having problems, and he got cross-checked in, I think it was the second game of the year against the Buffalo Sabres, and like ruptured whatever was like contained the fluid in his lungs, and he had fluid in his lungs, and he ended up in the hospital and said like, I thought I was dying. I mean, whatever that was, absolutely horrifying. Glad that he is well, but like just what an absolutely insane, horrifying, stomach churning kind of story. But yes, other than that, and other than the other major Breakup Day related topic that I know we have to discuss, you're right. I don't think that there were any really huge stories to come out of Rangers Breakup Day.
No. All right. So before we get to the Drury piece of it all, I have a question for you. I was thinking about this last night. The Dallas Minnesota series is tied 1-1 as of this recording. We're actually recording on a Wednesday this week. Late. It's actually Blueshirt Bandwidth After Dark. There are two outcomes for the Rangers here, and I think both of them are good. If Minnesota wins, the Rangers get a better draft pick because the Rangers get the better of Dallas's or Carolina's draft pick. Carolina's up 2-0 in the series. Again, I don't know if they're playing today. I think they might be. More than likely, they're going to beat Ottawa. So, Dallas losing this series against Minnesota would be good for the Rangers draft. However, Minnesota losing to the point that Elliot Friedman was making in the first round would probably kick Bill Guerin into a little bit more of a serious conversation about Vincent Trocheck next year. Because you're correct, and Elliot Friedman is correct, and this is something you and I have speculated about from the jump when Vincent Trocheck wasn't traded at the trade deadline, which was like, hey, there's going to be some teams that are going to lose in the playoffs this year in some fashion. and they're going to talk themselves into the fact that they're a Vincent Trocheck away from, and this is how you get more draft value for him. So what do you think is the better outcome for the Rangers? Minnesota winning and the Rangers getting a better guaranteed draft pick from the Dallas trade or the K'Andre Miller trade, or Minnesota losing and the thought process that Bill Guerin might be more interested in Vincent Trocheck now?
I think the better outcome is probably Minnesota winning and getting the better pick from Dallas for two reasons. One, I think a second round exit for the Minnesota Wild would have largely the same effect in the mind of Bill Guerin. That would be the team just being out too soon. It's not like we got to the Western Conference final and we lost in 6 or 7 games, or we got to the Stanley Cup final and we just came up short kind of thing, which kind of funny. It almost circles back around at that point too, where if they were to get that far and come up short, I think the demand in Guerin's mind for a Trocheck kind of player might be equally as large as if they exited in the first or second round. So almost in that sense, I don't know how much it affects the Minnesota trade market for Trocheck. And I also just think that there is a broader market for Trocheck, period, end of story, that even if Minnesota had talked themselves out of it, I think there are other teams that absolutely are going to be in the hunt for that for all the reasons that we have talked about previously, right? Like in a way, in a manner of speaking, Vincent Trocheck can be thought of not just the best piece that's available on the trade market, but the best piece that's available on the equivalency of the free agent market, because there is nobody other than Alex Tuch that we think of that's going to be currently available on the free agent market this summer. So I think the better outcome for the Rangers is to get the slightly higher draft pick, because I just don't think Minnesota is not the entirety of the market for Trocheck. And I'm not even convinced that Minnesota going to the second round or even deeper in the playoffs necessarily affects their appetite for Trocheck unless they win the Stanley Cup. That would be the only thing where you completely, to me, rule it out.
It's funny. I actually disagree with you, and I'm no longer talking about necessarily Minnesota and Trocheck, just in general. If I'm a general manager, I actually look at a first round exit or a Stanley Cup exit as the two instigating events of we need to go out and do something big. Because if you're Minnesota and you're expected to have like Stanley Cup aspirations and you lose in the first round, something's fucked up. You got to fix this. If you lose in the Eastern Conference final or really the Stanley Cup final, then it's like, oh, we're a piece away. I think if you lose in the second round, you can kind of talk yourself into a little bit of like, well, maybe we just ran into a hot team, or it's not as embarrassing as a first round exit would be. I
Sure,
agree with you, though.
it depends on the circumstances, though. Like, it would depend on who they play. It would depend on how the series would play out.
Dallas is a wagon. They're a great team. So, like, Bill Guerin may talk himself into like, oh, we lost in the first round, but they're an amazing team, and we have to, do something about that. Totally fine. I agree with you, though, that like guarantee me the better draft pick, and then I'll worry about like I think more than anything else, unless a team truly talks themselves into like they're a Trocheck away from the Stanley Cup, which may happen in the playoffs. I think Vincent Trocheck would be the most sought after free agent on the market right now.
I think Vincent Trocheck is the most sought after player that we know of who will be available on the trade market.
That's the point.
In lieu of the free agent market not having anyone. So I just don't know that any of it matters in that sense. I think there is going to be a robust market for Trocheck no matter what, no matter who exits when. And if I'm the Rangers in that case, I just want the higher first round draft pick, because if both of those, if we get a Carolina Dallas Stanley Cup final, God help us, really doesn't. You get a pick that's basically a second round draft pick, and you're almost into a second round territory at that point anyway. But we've seen players fall into the 20s before, so yeah, I just want the better of the draft picks, and I will let the rest of the chips fall where they may. We did have a question last week about if you watch the playoffs when the Rangers are not in it. Do you watch any, Joe?
So not really. At least not religiously. So here's the deal. let me explain something about my sickness to all of you. The only sports team I lose sleep over is the New York Rangers. That's it. I sent Eric this meme I saw on Instagram where somebody's complaining about their team not making the playoffs, and then it's like my team when they're in the in the playoffs, and it's like a series. It's The Bear, right? Is the show that's from?
Yes. Yeah.
There's a series of like clips of the chef going nuts on the bear and like stressing out, which is me. Like that's what I am during the playoffs. My heart rate's at 150 beats a minute. I'm fucking freaking out the entire time. Like it's just what it is. But I can't. There's not enough room for all the insanity. Now, I will tell you, normally I don't get like FOMO. Watching Buffalo score that go-ahead goal in game 1.
Yeah.
And granted, that is like over a decade of pent-up frustration.
14 years.
The most blue balls you could possibly have as a fan base. And like you finally had your moment. That one I felt. I was like, oh, it would be awesome to be in that arena right now. But no, I'll like if a game is on and I'm not doing anything, I'll watch it. I don't want like I am not a Devils fan who would watch every single Rangers playoff game like they all do. That would never, ever happen. Ever.
So I bring it up because my experience generally is like I will watch the Stanley Cup final or as much of the Stanley Cup final as I can because I enjoy the sport and it's the Stanley Cup final. I immediately turn on any game that's in overtime. If it's in overtime, I'm turning it on.
I'm with you, for sure.
And there's, of course, that famous tweet of, like, why watch playoff overtime hockey when you can just do cocaine and ride a motorcycle out of a helicopter? And I have a good friend who is a huge baseball fan. And I remember him saying to me that, like, the extra innings, he's a Cubs fan. And the experience of living through extra innings in 2016 in Game 7 of the World Series as a Cubs fan was just excruciating. But you have moments to breathe, in between pitches, in between outs and plays. Hockey, not really as much. I mean, you have stoppages, but it's not the same. There is just this intensity of at any moment it could end. And he's like, I have no idea how you do that if you're a fan of any of those teams. Like I would just be an absolute mess. If that were me. So anyway, I bring it up because people also asked if there's somebody that you're rooting for in this year's NHL playoffs, and my answer to that was I don't really have anybody that I'm rooting for. I have a reverse hierarchy of teams that I do not wish to see win championships, most of which are assumable. But I want to make a slight amendment to that after thinking about it this week, which is there is an otherwise kind of nightmare scenario that I think would be just too hilarious to pass up, although it certainly looks like it's not going to come to pass because as I just checked the scores right now, the Philadelphia Flyers lead the Pittsburgh Penguins 3-1 in that game. So the Penguins are looking to be down 3-0. I would accept a Penguins championship if they defeated Edmonton and Edmonton lost in the Stanley Cup final for the 3rd consecutive year, and they lost to a team with Stuart Skinner as their goaltender. That would just be too hilarious to pass up. So
Connor McDavid literally murders somebody if that happens, right?
Yes. Like that is the point where, people make the joke all the time of give Igor Shesterkin a gun, give Connor McDavid a gun.
Correct.
Like if you traded for an Edmonton, Connor Ingram is the guy who is starting in goal for Edmonton. They traded for Tristan Jarry for the guy who is, and it's admittedly not going well for the Penguins, but they traded Stu Skinner, who played fine in Pittsburgh after the trade, for a completely defective goaltender who apparently all of his teammates hate. And not even to start him,
I know.
You got Connor Ingram starting. And the idea of they could scrape their way to the Stanley Cup final, lose to Stuart Skinner's Pittsburgh Penguins would be fucking hilarious.
Oh, it's the best.
But otherwise, no, absolutely I do not want to see the Pittsburgh Penguins win another Stanley Cup. But there's a bit of also, I'll just say, I have seen the Pittsburgh Penguins win Stanley
Yeah, so,
Cups in my
like
lifetime, so it's like I'm almost kind of to the point now where it's like I would hate it, but it's like I've seen this movie before and fine, okay, whatever. There are more long-suffering teams that I hate that I would like to see remain long-suffering.
yeah, like, I don't want the Flyers to win for exactly
Absolutely
that
not.
reason. I don't want the Penguins to win either. It wouldn't bother me because it's already happened, so, like, it doesn't matter. Carolina's a big no-no for me. Do not win. Absolutely not. And l so, it's also I'm the same way you are. There's teams that I root against, rather than teams that I'm, like, rooting for. I can't root for another team. I root for one team. That's just how that works. So any team playing Carolina or any team playing Dallas, I'm rooting for just for the draft pick perspective of things. That like I love the Penguins losing to the Flyers because Penguin fans are my favorite, like some of my favorite fan bases because they are such whiny children. The amount of like hand wringing and bullshit from the Flyers beating them is just chef's kiss. It's the best. So go ahead, Philly, do your thing, and then Tockett's gonna fucking lose anyway in the next round.
I
It doesn't
know
matter.
it really is a shame. I mean, you look at the series; it's about to be 3-0 Flyers. I just can't believe Jacob Trouba would do this.
I know that he could possibly, and oh god, the Penguins media just don't not a thing.
They're insane. Yeah, like
Um,
one of the best things that I know this is the crew of this podcast that is the most pro John Tortorella. Chip is the
for
dissenting
sure.
voice on that count. One of my favorite things that Tortorella did during his time with the Rangers was that post game rant about Pittsburgh and their whining stars. It was
Correct.
glorious. I mean, get that embroidered on a pillow and give it to me for Father's Day. That was an absolute gift.
And like the reason I love Tortorella, not that I want him near my hockey team, but the reason I
Agreed.
love Tortorella, he would do the things that I think I would do as a fan coaching the New
Right.
York Rangers. Like
Right.
I'd 100% be up there like fuck Crosby, fuck Malkin. So, I get it. But yeah, I just there have been some hilarious outcomes. I think e- e- the more I think about it, Ottawa getting chased in a sweep by Carolina on top of the Tkachuk nonsense with like everybody hating him in Canada, and then obviously some self-inflicted wounds with the way that they handled the gold medal. Like, get him the fuck out of there. Like, make him want to leave, and that's something I see potentially happening for the New York Rangers. If I was gonna go out there and try to finagle my way to some soft tampering, I want to be clear because this conversation has come up too. Like, I don't know if I would trade Alexi Lafreniere as part of a broader package to get Kachuk. Not because I think Lafreniere is a better player, but like I don't think Kachuk is that much of a game breaker.
Well,
I
let's
think
let's let's
additive.
table this. Let's table this because there is a question
Oh,
about
there is a
this.
question. Okay,
Yeah.
but anyway, I again, I've not watched a single playoff game. I am like you. If a game is in overtime, I'll turn it on. Typically, unless there's like a rooting interest, like if I'm watching a Utah, Vegas game, I'm rooting for the home team because there's nothing like a home playoff crowd. But that's it. That's my like I'm not going out of my way to watch a Sabres game or if
Yeah.
no, it doesn't work like that for me. Should I let you off the leash now? Vince Mercogliano of The Athletic, not The Atlantic, wrote a story that was critical of Chris Drury's lack of transparency, let's say. And a story like this kind of comes out every now and again. I will say that there has been much more of this type of reporting in recent history than we're used to seeing. So, it is interesting for me sometimes because I remember what it was like in with the banter, back in its infancy and when we really first got started, that you would never see stuff like this. I actually have a distinct memory of it might have actually been a USA Today reporter writing like the top 10 worst trades that Glenn Sather ever made or something. And then I don't think he was on the beat all that much longer. I don't remember his name. Anyway, so it's a pretty critical story that I think is fair about Chris Drury that Eric and I have talked about a little bit behind the scenes in the green room, if you will. But Eric, I'll just set you up and let you take your piece, and I'll interject my pieces. And
Sure. Sure.
We'll get
So,
there.
read Vince's piece. I think is a matter of strategy. If I were advising Chris Drury, I would send him for some media training. I very much get the impression, and I imagine you agree with this, Joe, that like these kinds of communication skills are not his bailiwick.
No,
And
not at
he
all.
knows it and he
Yep.
understands it. And look, I have done communications consulting in the past. I've been in the PR business. I've been in marketing. I work with people who are talkers and storytellers all the time. And you can improve those skills, but everybody is going to have a ceiling, right? Like you're never going to turn, I don't think, Chris Drury into some amazing world-beating orator, but he certainly could improve his skills at handling the media. I think he is just looking at it and saying, this isn't something that I'm good at. I'm going to do it absolutely as little as possible and only as much as I absolutely have to do. And that is just going to be my strategy for handling this part of the job. The what irks me about Vince's piece is not I think it would be better if he handled things differently part of it. I agree that I think it would be better if Drury handled the media better, if he were a little bit more forthcoming. Uh, what irks me is there's a throwaway line in the piece of like, for necessary context or something like that, we're not covering the Pentagon. And then kind of moves off that very quickly. But I think that's worth dwelling on for a moment here. Drury is not a public servant. He's not a member of Congress. He is not somebody who has been elected to this position. The who he is accountable to is not us. It is not the fans. It is the owner. Like there's that line in Moneyball, right? Where the older scout says, we need to remember that, the Billy Bean as the general manager is accountable to ownership and God. And that's it, not to them. And I understand from the perspective of somebody like a Vince or a Molly or a Peter Baugh, not Buttigieg, who have these roles, they cover these teams, they are members of the media. It would be better for them. It would be better for the stories that they write if Chris Drury were more verbose, if he were more forthcoming. I totally get that. But he's not a public servant. He is not a congressman or a senator. He is not accountable to the people in the same kind of way. And what ultimately matters is what James Dolan thinks. And what ultimately matters is the quality of the product that is put on the ice. And frankly, I'm just of the belief that if you were to put Chris Drury in an open-ended press conference in person where people can ask follow-up questions. So it's not the circumstance that Vince is describing where it's these 10 to 15-minute Zoom calls where you get to ask one question and you're muted again afterwards. Like just for simple optics perspective, I would not handle things that way. I would not advise handling things that way. But I still think if you had an hour of Drury in front of every reporter who covers the Rangers with the ability to ask as many questions and follow-ups as they want, I don't think you would get any more information out of him than you're currently getting. I just don't. I think he would continue to give you the exact same kinds of non-answers. I suppose you could make an argument that showing his repeated evasions of questions maybe tells you something, but I guess I'll tie it off here, which is I don't really know how much you're going to get out of this or no matter what. I just don't. The fact we've talked about this before, the fact that there isn't a publicly disclosed strategy doesn't mean that one doesn't exist. So I think you could ask him a million questions. I think he's going to give you the same non-answers because I think he's just not going to talk about that stuff in public. He also clearly doesn't like to talk about stuff retrospectively. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of explanations. You can think that this is a poor way of doing business. You can think that this isn't advisable. I tend to agree on that point. But I just don't know that I have a whole lot of time for the hand-wringing that we're getting about the way that he handles the media and that he does these press conferences. And if the product on the ice continues to be as bad as it has been, Drury is going to be fired. And I don't know that there's any amount of press conferences he could have given and answers to questions that are asked that he could have given that is going to change any of that. What ultimately matters is whether the Rangers improve or they don't. And I understand people's desire to want to hear more. I just honestly don't think you're going to get that much more out of him no matter what. And I think transparency is just a wildly overrated thing. It's good in a lot of circumstances. I think you want some transparency, certainly in government and things like that. But you can't negotiate with cameras in front of you. And I understand Drury's perspective of not wanting to share a lot of information publicly because that can have effects on the way he deals with other teams and other GMs and the way that other GMs look at him and what he's said publicly and what he's after. I mean, do you honestly think that teams didn't treat the Vancouver Canucks differently because of all the things that Jim Rutherford has said in public about that team and about those players? So there's a flip side of this too, where you have way too much information, a GM or a president answering way too many questions, and it's to your detriment. It's not to your benefit. So in conclusion, I think the best thing for the Rangers would be to get somebody else in a role on the team in management who can handle the media better than Drury and who can play that role. I think that's the happy medium. I think that's the compromise. If the assumption is that Drury's not gone anytime soon, it's just not what he's good at. I think he knows he's not good at it. I think he believes he can't get that much better at it, and he thinks it's not worth his time. And I really am just unpersuaded of how beneficial it would be to everyone or anyone if he had different types of press conferences.
Yeah, there's a few threads to pull at there. I'll agree with you that, and I actually didn't really take Vince's article this way, so this isn't a shot at him at all. There are articles that come out occasionally in every sport about like the lack of access, right? And we've actually talked about the lack of access that the Rangers have done with some of their prospects, specifically Liam Greentree right after the Artemi Panarin trade, that I think you and I would agree with are like just stupid policies that don't help anyone, right?
I think
like
it's a poor strategy.
Yeah, just pure stupidity. What I will say is, and some of you are going to roll your eyes at this, so I'll start here. When I first graduated from college, I was a sports reporter for a local newspaper in Northern Connecticut. And like, I remember covering, New Britain football games, the high school team, where, it's our publishing time was 10:20 or 10:45. Game ends at 10:15. I'm running downstairs to try to get a quote, running back to my car, writing with like one of those MiFis and like on my little Mac, and it's freezing outside and like my notes are in pencil. I remember going to high school girls basketball games where I'm keeping my own statistics and, some parents calling me to yell at me because my statistics are wrong. And look, there were other things, right? I covered the New Britain Rockats, which is a double A, baseball affiliate, the Hartford Whale at the time. So, I've done it, not at the professional level in terms of like a big four team. I get how annoying it is to not get quotes and comments and that it makes your job more difficult. I'll also point out, and this is the thing that I think a lot of people are going to roll their eyes at, Blueshirt Banter has been around since 2009, and we have never been credentialed by the New York Rangers. We have covered this team for 17 years, if my math is correct, without a single quote from a New York Rangers player outside of a very limited stint where we were permitted to get NHL credentials before, that was taken away from us. Like I covered the Winter Classic against Philadelphia as a member of the media through the NHL, there. So I also, I get it. It makes your life harder. I understand. The other piece of the equation, and this is where you and I kind of separate a little bit, I do think that one of the points that Vince was making, that like Drury can't even be bothered to be seen on video, is fucking cowardly in a way. And I also agree with you that, yes, I don't think it changes anything. I don't think an open forum changes anything. I think Chris Drury's answers might be a little bit more revealing just because he's in a room with somebody and, they can ask follow-up questions and they're not immediately being muted. But Chris Drury's just not good at this. It appears Leon Rose is also not that good at this. And this is the other point I want to make. And I'm going to contradict Chip a little bit here. Chip is a big believer in well, this is what Dolan wants. I don't necessarily think that's true, or at least fully accurate. I think it's what Dolan allows. Because Jeff Gordon and John Davidson spoke to the media all the time. More than happy to do that. More than happy to have those conversations. Get out in front of people, do the bit. Dolan didn't stop them. It's not a Dolan policy. But Dolan's not going to get in there and be like, hey, you need to have these conversations. Would I, going back to the John Tortorella comment, as a fan, like to see Chris Drury squirm a little bit and get my pound of flesh? Yes. Would it change anything? No, it wouldn't. And the Rangers have never been a particularly forthcoming team about their plans. I also understand why, Drury probably doesn't want to go into the rears all that often because it doesn't look particularly good right now. But I get both sides of the argument. I agree with you. I don't think it's anything to lose sleep over. We talked about the hand wringing with him releasing the letter instead of doing I don't think it matters. And I agree with you as well that you could have somebody like Jim Rutherford speak too much and then it's a problem. And now you're dealing with a different issue. I also just think that I would like to see there are things that you can gather from people's facial expressions, from the way they react to things, to the way their hand motions go and their hand gestures. I also agree with Vince that this does put a lot more pressure on Mike Sullivan and the leadership core of the team to answer questions that should otherwise be answered by the guy who's making the fucking decisions. But the bottom line foundation of all of this is I don't think anything changes. It's just what I would like to see. And if it were me, I'd like to think I'd get out ahead of it and I'd be in front of people and whatever. But that's me.
Yeah, I want to be clear that this next comment is not directed at Vince because this is not something that Vince is saying. But it kind of along the lines of what you were saying there of the, I would like to see him squirm and I would like to see him be barraged with these questions and all of that. I get it. I understand where you're coming from with that. My point is, and I understand that this is going to annoy a bunch of people out there, but and again, this is my point where it's not directed at Vince. It's directed more at the people who were in my mentions on Twitter. You aren't owed shit. You are not owed a damn thing. Again, this is not an elected official that we are talking about. I would have an absolutely different opinion about the level of accountability because you are, as a voter, the person who they are accountable to. The media is a means through which you are able to hear what they have to say. And if they are just not talking to the media, I think it's a completely different thing. This is a sports franchise. It is owned by an incredibly wealthy guy who is ultimately the one who is going to decide the fate of Chris Drury, not us. So it's, again, fine. I want to emphasize that as somebody who has done media strategy, I would advise Chris Drury to perhaps just make it clear that he will do one or maybe two big press conferences a year with a time cap, or perhaps it's not uncommon to you get a question and you get a follow-up, each reporter. And that's the extent of that he's willing to do with that. And then he'll do these kinds of short over Zoom, no video updates as necessary. These are things that I would advise him to do from a strategic standpoint. I just get really irked at the, essentially the sentiment that I think you were just expressing, that it was it would make me feel good to watch him be miserable. And it's not that I don't understand it. It's just that I don't give a shit. I really don't give a shit if that makes you feel better or worse. I don't care. It just does not matter to me all that much. Because again, I don't think it's going to change our knowledge base at all. That could be for the better, that could be for the worse. I don't think we're getting a lot more information. I think there's plenty of reasons to not want to be forthcoming with answers to some of these questions because it will have implications for future you that you don't necessarily want to deal with again in the way that Jim Rutherford and the Vancouver Canucks have had to deal with a lot of these things. So I think it's poor strategy. I wouldn't advise it. I would advise him to find some kind of a compromise. I think Vince's frustrations from the perspective of a reporter are completely reasonable. The thing that I just really was bothered by was the sloughing off of the oh, well, we're not covering somebody in the White House or the Pentagon or Congress or something like that. You're right. You're not. The dynamic is different. And it's a question then of just like what is smart, not versus what you are owed. And I think I just heard from a lot of fans who think they are owed something from the president and general manager of a sports team that they root for whom they can vote if they want, in a sense. They cannot renew their season tickets. They cannot buy tickets. They cannot buy merchandise. You can vote in that manner. But ultimately, the only person who matters is Jim Dolan. It's the only person who matters.
Yeah, and to clarify, the comment about like seeing him squirm is literally a yeah, as a fan, you want your pound of flesh. I get it. The actual reason I would like to see him in a live room, it's Vince and Molly and Peter and everybody else, Colin's job to like unearth information, right? And
Totally.
getting answers and asking follow-up questions is one way to do those things. And you'd probably get more information as a fan if it was not manicured the way that it is, which is exactly why it's manicured the way that it is.
I'm sorry, but would you this is
For
one
sure.
of the things that
absolutely
is deep,
you would.
this is deep.
I'm not
This is
suggesting
one of the
you'd get
things
like
that's
nuclear code secrets, but you'd get more information
no,
than you're getting
I don't.
right now.
I mean, yes, you would get more information of some kinds than you were getting right now.
Correct.
But Joe, we are talking about a sport in which there are no insiders. There are no people with true insider information. Elliot Friedman is the closest thing we've got to that, and he tweets out something that is going to happen 10 seconds before the official account of the National Hockey League team that just made the trade posted on their own account. Like again, I think the reporter core, the beats that cover the Rangers are pretty great, frankly. I think Vince is very good. I think Molly is great. I think Colin is great. I think Peter does great work. I think these guys are very, very good. And I want to be clear, I sympathize with their frustrations here. But this is a league, Joe, where nobody knows anything until it's officially announced. Ever. So yes, you would get some kind of slightly increased level of information. And in some cases, just, things that we have to parse, like we're trying to read bird entrails to try to figure out what this eyebrow raise from Chris Drury meant when this question was asked. That's the kind of stuff that we would be doing. And if it were a league where there were more reporting on the stuff that is happening in the background, maybe I would feel differently, but it's a league-wide thing. There's just not overall a ton of information and deep background reporting on how things happen. There's some, it's not none, but I come back to, we have no insiders. We only know things when teams announce them. So I don't want to say it's much ado about nothing, but it's much ado about very little to me what this complaint is about.
It's fine.
And I say this as somebody, just to be clear, is increasingly moved in the direction of I don't think Chris Drury is up for the job. In fact, we just started the report card series for this New York Rangers team. And I do have to write some stuff about, I believe I'm writing the Chris Drury one. I believe I wrote the Chris Drury one last year. So, or I wrote the preview for this season. So, I'm increasingly where a lot of fans have been. I just don't know that this really moves me all that much. And apologies out there if it's something that's just really important to you. It just doesn't do much for me.
Well, I do think the hatred of Chris Drury by a lot of people also like pops into play here and like forces guys to want it.
One last point to what you just said there. I would also feel differently about it from the fan perspective if I thought it actually had the potential of changing the minds of any of those fans. I don't think it would change a damn person's mind whether they got every single day the man did an hour-long press conference or he never did them. I don't think it would matter at all.
It would just give them more shit
people.
to complain about, quite frankly.
Exactly.
They don't
so there you go.
We've done an hour and 10 minutes. Let's get to questions. Do you mind reading them? My voice is beginning to give out.
That is just fine. Of course, you can ask questions by becoming a member at blueshirtbanter.com, $85 a year, and our $40 community tier will give you the opportunity to ask questions. Like this question from Billy Ray. Not sure who made the comment, but it was made on one of the threads last week that if McDavid was on the Rangers, they would be a better team than the current Edmonton Oilers. Agree or disagree?
1,000,000% agree. Like, you're just adding McDavid to the team.
You're adding McDavid
to the Rangers.
So
you're not subtracting anything. You're just adding McDavid to the Rangers.
You're adding McDavid.
Yes,
Does that
I think the
make
Rangers,
the Rangers
are
better than the current Edmonton Oilers?
Yes. Just from a goalie perspective, yes. You're subtracting McDavid from the Oilers, correct?
Yes, obviously.
Then yes.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the Rangers do not have a second fiddle player to the quality of Leon Draisaitl, but adding the greatest player in the world with the best goalie in the National Hockey League and a pretty decent supporting cast. I mean, yeah, I think the goaltending part of it alone makes them better than the Edmonton Oilers.
Correct. Yes.
So I'm going to agree with that. Domi versus Probert. What a great throwback name. Asks the question, Alex Tuch will be 30 in about 3 weeks. He is probably going to command 7 years on the open market. Are you getting involved or trying to find top six help another way?
Absolutely not. I don't even care if I don't get top six help. This team has not shown me that they deserve long-term investment for a guy who's basically a win now piece. Next. Don't need it. Thank you.
I think that is correct. It's not a difference maker. Also, just the fact that the contract he's going to get is going to be so ridiculously inflated because he's going to be the only thing available on the free agent market. So he is going to get a ridiculous bag. Like he should send a fruit basket to Jack Eichel and Connor McDavid for taking themselves off of that market because he is going to be the beneficiary of it.
Correct.
Ryan D. Gill asks, Dolan loves poisoning the well and Drury loves drinking from it. Combining corporate influence and a fan base that can't even afford seats at MSG to get their booze in, what is our future in drawing free agents and creating a culture of loyal players and not I guess he means mercenary clients. For example, can any GM come in here and change anything at all? Is it just an empty suit at this point, an empty head to go with an empty suit? I don't know that I agree with the premise of the question.
Yeah, I don't think I do either. Look, the Rangers will always have three things. Technically four, but I think you can put two of them together that make an enormous difference. They have Madison Square Garden. They have the fact that they are an Original Six franchise. And they have New York. Those three things are always going to attract free agents. Always. Now, will you have premier free agents like Connor McDavid say, fuck this, I'm not going there because the situation's not good? Maybe. But Madison Square Garden, New York, and an Original Six franchise has worked for, what are the Rangers? They're 100. It's worked for 100 years. It'll work for 100 more. And believe it or not, and we've talked about this before, I would actually make an argument that James Dolan is a very good hockey owner. Probably one of the best. Spends money, Is he too loyal? For sure. Could he be a little bit more, ruthless with his guys? For sure. But in the grand scheme of things, James Dolan is definitely, he spends his money. He's not afraid to spend his money. That's really the main thing that you want out of an owner. And I think players love him, to be fair.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I don't know that there is that talent attracting problem that the question implies that there is. I would have to see evidence of it over a more extended period of time than I think what we are talking about is this current trouble in Rangerland for me to buy into that premise. But I'm going to jump ahead to a question from Chip here because I think it actually speaks to something that you just brought up. Joe, Eric, thanks for having me on. Longtime listener, first-time caller here. This question is more for Eric because it involves baseball, which is a sport that Joe acknowledges exists but knows nothing about. The question is, would you rather Hal Steinbrenner owned the Yankees, Knicks, and Rangers, or James Dolan owned the Yankees, Knicks, and Rangers?
I can answer this question too.
Yeah. The answer is Dolan.
Correct. Hal Steinbrenner has sort of ruined what the Yankee culture was in a lot of respects, from what I can gather. I'm not a huge baseball guy, so
you're correct about that. The Hal Steinbrenner, I don't actually think cares all that much about baseball. Certainly not in the way that his father did. And that's kind of like the dark irony of all of this is that the guy who is, I won't say ruining the Yankees. I mean, as a friend of mine who is a Chicago White Sox fan made the point of yes, the Yankees, while, having not won a World Series since 2009, regularly making the playoffs is a better existence than the White Sox, who are awful all of the time. I get the point. Point is well taken. But what Hal Steinbrenner has done to sully the Yankees is his refusal to spend money, his lack of a desire to go above the luxury tax. His dad wouldn't have given a shit. His dad would have gone out there and thrown whatever amount of money was necessary to get somebody like Shohei Ohtani, to get whoever was available in free agency, especially if that guy had played a role at any point in time in beating the Yankees. And they don't do that anymore. To your point, Dolan is not afraid to spend his money. On the Knicks side, he was too involved in a meddling way. And there's plenty of arguments to be made about George Steinbrenner and the way he got involved in player personnel decisions and management decisions, especially earlier on in his tenure. He created, in that sense, 1980s New York Yankees who were not good. So there are pluses and minuses to all of this, but Dolan, literally having James Dolan in a league without a salary cap, like Major League Baseball, I think would be absolutely incredible because I think he would be willing to throw money at players in a way that the current Yankees are not willing to. So in the original formulation of Chip's question, I would prefer a scenario where the Yankees were sold to Jim Dolan rather than the Rangers being sold to Hal Stein.
Correct. I agree.
All right, let me go back up here to our other question from Chip. And this is the last question that we've got. And this is the one that subject we said we should table for later. So we'll close the show on it. From Chip, how surprised are you by Brady Tkachuk being a complete and utter non-factor from a positive standpoint for Ottawa so far in this series?
Well, this is why you stopped me from saying this.
He has more penalty minutes than shots on goal, 0 points, and has put the Senators in terrible spots. I can't say how little I want him anywhere near the Rangers.
This circumstance in Ottawa, I believe, is proving the point that I was making before, which is Brady Tkachuk is being asked to be the best player on a team. And he's not that guy. He is an amplifier the same way that Miller is an amplifier, not the anchor that I think Miller is, but can over amplify, if you will, like he's doing in this playoff series right now. I would happily take Brady Tkachuk on the New York Rangers, but not at the expense of Alexis Lafreniere. and plus. Like, if it was 1-for-1, obviously you have to think about it and probably do it. But the two-way game that Lafreniere plays, the fact that he almost put up 60 points this year despite having a terrible year. I think he had, 37 points in his final 40 games. Like, we're seeing something here. The Tkachuk would be an awesome if I could just pick him up and put him on the Rangers. You do it. He doesn't have to be the best player on the team. He adds a level. I think we overvalue how good Matthew Tkachuk is as well, just because of the team that he plays on. He plays on one of the deepest and most well-rounded hockey teams that we've seen in a really long time. But you're seeing what happens when Tkachuk is asked to be the guy. And he's not the guy. He's a great player, not trying to take anything away from him. He can absolutely impact the game. Mike Sullivan was gushing over how much of an influence he was on the bench for Team USA. He also didn't have to be the guy. That's the takeaway. I'd happily take him on the New York Rangers. I am not emptying the farm for him.
The skill set I didn't desire more is the one that Jason Robertson has. A guy who is a goal scorer and a pretty pure goal scorer at that. I think the style of hockey that Brady Tkachuk plays, and I think you are largely right about this, is, what Brady Tkachuk is missing in Ottawa is an Alexander Barkov. That's what he's missing in Ottawa. And you know what? Not a lot of teams have an Alexander Barkov. And Matthew Tkachuk has benefited from being on a team that has had an Alexander Barkov. The profile to me, the skill sets that the Rangers need is a more pure offensive one. They just did not have enough guys who could score goals, especially earlier this year. There was not enough elite goal scoring talent on this team. They need more of that. So I'm more eager to acquire a player like Robertson than I am a player like Brady Tkachuk. Where I and you, I think, disagree with Chip is I am not saying I don't want him anywhere near the New York Rangers. I agree with you. I would happily take him on the New York Rangers. It would have to be one of those circumstances where, for whatever reason, your soft tampering of JT Miller, whispering sweet American nothings in his ear to draw him across the border. If he said, I want to be traded and I will only accept a trade to the New York Rangers, okay, fine. Like, you're not emptying the farm for that. You are probably giving up, some assets of real value in that trade, but you're not going to have to empty the farm for him to the extent you have a farm to empty. I would absolutely accept that scenario, but I am much more of I would like a Jason Robertson type player on my team than a Brady Tkachuk type player on my team. That's where I am.
I agree with you, but I do think that if you could get Tkachuk, you amplify what the Rangers want to be. Like, I would bet that Mike Sullivan and Chris Drury would rather have Tkachuk than Robertson, as seen by the fact that Robertson did not make the USA Olympic team.
Yeah.
And I disagree with them. I think they're wrong. Yep. So, that's my takeaway on this. But yeah, it is. It's hard when the Rangers actually do the things that you want them to do, right? Like, if the Rangers can actually turn into a team where they are playing this tough and you're getting the rough and tumble, junkyard dog team that you're talking about, and Brady Tkachuk is part of the issue or part of the solution rather, and the Rangers are jumping around and they're getting dragged into the fight and they're involved. Like, those are really fun, successful teams. But I would tell you that for where the Rangers are right now, I'm just taking a pure goal scorer. The Rangers just need it over all the other things that Tkachuk brings to the table.
I would accept the Tkachuk thing more readily in a situation where it's I'll take Tkachuk as the better version of the type of player that JT Miller is supposed to be if JT Miller is gone.
Like if Tkachuk was on the 23-24 team that went to the Eastern Conference Final, yeah, maybe they
That may have helped.
So is that it? That's everything?
That's it. That's all.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining. TripBanter.com, $85 a year gets you all your ad-free access to the New York Rangers. Spotify, please leave us 5 stars. Leave a nice review.
Follow us. Follow us on Spotify.
Yes, we need you to follow us. Apple, do the same thing. YouTube.com/BlueshirtBanter. Facebook.com/BlueshirtBanter. BlueshirtBanter.com/BlueshirtBanter. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for being here. We will see you next week. Bye for now.